Hello everyone and a warm welcome to today's episode. I have prepared for you a book that I read when I was a kid, and this book stayed with me for all my life. But actually I forgot its name and its author, and I really wanted to revisit it until now recently when I found it, and I want to share it with you, so please keep watching because I bet you like it. The book is called Enemy Mine and it's written by Barry Longyear, so here goes. Enemy mine action happens in the distant future, somewhere in the 21st century, when Earth nations finally achieved peace. And they had begun working together to explore and colonize the outer space. Unfortunately, Earth wasn't the only one out there, and Earth colonists encountered an alien non-humanoid species known as the Dracs. Dispute over who was where first had led to battles, and those battles led to war. And our story begins with two pilots, a human and an alien, that crash land on a desert planet after a tenacious battle in the skies above. The planet they landed on, Fyrine IV, was very harsh, barely habitable, and to make things even worse, they had crashed on a tight patch of rock at the mercy of a furious ocean. As they are face-to-face, sworn enemies, the fight is different now because now they could see each other. They were only feet away. And to end the suspense, D.I.Y, the human pilot, said something to the Drac pilot, a phrase that he had learned at the academy and that he knew that could drive any Drac crazy. And he says something like, "Shizumat," which was a great Drac philosopher, eats Key's excrements. Stupefied, the Drac, shocked at first, replies back much like Yoda, "Irkman, your Mickey Mouse dumb is." And you can imagine this caused the human D.I.Y to burst into a crazy laughter, until he fell on his knees, as he swore to fight for many things, but that famous rodent was not amongst them. Their relation was as rocky as the planet they landed on, but D.I.Y and Jerry, because this is how the human called the alien, had agreed to a silent truce in order to work together to survive. First, they used the Drac's capsule as a shelter and ate his rations that were inside so they won't starve to death. Eventually, D.I.Y realized that remaining on that small patch of an island was a risky gamble with life, and proposed to Jerry to sail the pod to a larger island where eventually they might find food and shelter and have more chances to survive. The Drac was resistant to the idea, but he told D.I.Y that he was free to go and that he could take the pod, and so D.I.Y was free to go and had the capsule if he wanted to. But the thought of being alone was so unpleasant. Then he tried to explain Jerry about loneliness and the fact that humans in general feel an ancestral need to be with another being. And then the Drac opened up and said that he wasn't afraid to leave the planet for his own life. But surprise, because he was endangering the life of his child, of the child he was bearing. You know, the Dracs were hermaphrodites. That means that one individual is able to conceive a child. This is how nature evolved in that corner of the universe. Chance makes it that a wave hits the pod when the two of them were arguing whether to leave or not, and the life capsule rolls into the furious ocean, tumbling the two pilots as if they were in a washing machine. Eventually, David the human wakes up, and much to his amaze, he sees that he is in a huge cave, and Jerry the drac sits near a campfire looking like he was trying to fry something, which is proven to be snake meat. The drac then feeds the weak human and tells him that he was unconscious for a few days. After he recovers, David realizes that Jerry had carried him quite a long way until they reach the shelter, and he feels gratitude to a person that was supposed to be his enemy. The two started working together, hunting for snakes, gathering firewood, making clothes from snake skins, and discussing all kinds of topics, from general truths that were discovered in both cultures, much to David's surprise and Jerry's satisfaction that a truth is a truth in any culture. They talk about life and philosophy, similarities and differences, and so David's curiosity and admiration for the drac culture is awakened. He finds out that the dracs can track their lineage up to 200 generations, and that each drac has to recite the lineage to be accepted as a grown-up. That unlike humans, the dracs, each family has 5 names to cycle through, and that the names themselves mean nothing. It's the deeds that each drac achieves through its lifetime that matters and must be remembered. Jerry's clan, the Jeriba family, cycles the names Tai, Hesni, Goting, Shingan, and Zammis. As Jerry's given name is Shingan, his baby name is to be called Zammis, and the cycle would begin again with another Jeriba Tai. They talk about all kinds of stuff, and sometimes they disagree. And David asks Jerry to talk about the teachings of Shizumat, the great wise drac. And here comes another fun fact. You know, the book is full of fun facts. Jerry refuses because, remember, David had insulted Shizumat when they first met on the island. David is fascinated by the spirit of this culture, and so he asks Jerry to teach him the language and to recite the lineage, which he later understands it's a great honor for Jerry. Gracefully, Jerry offers David the talisman, the sacred drac book, to wear around his neck. More time passes and Jerry realizes that it is time to deliver Zammis. But he can tell that something is dreadfully wrong, although he doesn't know what. Still, he realizes that these complications are very serious. David quickly goes into panic, and the thought of losing Jerry, who by now was becoming his brother, his teacher, and on Fyrine IV, his only friend, was horror for Jerry. So David's fear only intensifies when Jerry suddenly calms down and begs David to take his place as a parent, and that one day David must fulfill the role that Jerry himself was destined for, to bring Zammis before the Holy Council on Drac and recite his lineage, that Jeriba clan will not end there on Fyrine IV. Jerry is only satisfied when David vows to do this. Jerry tells David that he must pull open the birthing sac, and along with Jerry's abdomen, to deliver Zammis. David can only watch hopeless as Jerry slowly passes on and dies. Stricken in horror, David sits numbly, but then he acts in order to save the drac baby. A hopeless David buries Jerry in a grave of rocks, realizing that with all Jerry taught him about the task he's undertaken, he taught David nothing about how to take care properly of a baby Wreck. David finds himself struggling with desperation, but he has to pull himself together because the baby Wreck depends on him. David realizes that baby Wrecks live on their fat storage for several days, but he eventually manages to feed the baby and holds it close against him and bundles him in some heavy skin garments to keep him warm. Zammis grows faster than a human child, quickly growing about the size of a human youth just transitioning into adolescence and able to think, reason and communicate. One day, when Zammis was just a couple of months old, he begins to question why he is different from David, starting from the most basic question: why David, whom he now calls uncle, has more than 3 fingers on his hand, and if he will eventually grow finger 4 and 5. Days pass with the two of them, human and alien child, living together, learning from each other and improvising all kinds of skills and goods like soap, sewage, impermeable tents and so on. David still goes to his friend's grave and talks to him about the progress that Zammis makes and their life on Fyrine IV. One of these days, David thinks he had spotted a bird, and when he returns to the cave, tells Zammis about it. But surprise, the boy hadn't seen any birds because there were no birds on Fyrine IV. They realized then that it was a sheep and decided to go to find the sheep. So David can fulfill the oath he made to Jerry to take Zammis to the Wreck world. The unexpected happens again, and David falls into a pit and breaks his leg. Unable to continue the journey, he asks Zammis to go ahead, find the sheep, and eventually bring help, and after that he faints from intense pain. When David opened his eyes again, he was aboard a starship en route to Earth. He asks about Zammis and he gets an answer full of contempt, being called a frog lover. Still, he finds out that Zammis is on his way to his home planet. Arrived on Earth, David understands that he doesn't fit there anymore. Even though the war was over, there was a lot of residual hate there. So instead of finally visiting his parents, he embarks on the first flight to the Wreck homeworld. After lots of hurdles and bribes, he manages to arrive at the Jeriba family residence, where he met Jeriba Gotting, Jerry's dad. And much to David's surprise, none of them knew that Zammis was alive, and they all thought that the line was dead. They go looking for Zammis and find him in an asylum, because when he arrived on Draco, he was preaching love for humans, and looks like the Wrecks weren't much different from the human society. In this case, we have a happy end, because even though Zammis was under sedation, still he recognizes the man who raised him and touches his hand and says, 4, 5, told you I'll never forget you, uncle. The last scene in the book sees Zammis' child Ty bringing his offspring Hesni to be raised by D.I.Y, where else than in the cave on Fyrine IV. He asks D.I.Y, that we understand that also raised Ty, to teach little Hesni the drugs teaching, the talmans and the ways. Gothing moved all the family on Fyrine IV and was now buried near his son Jeribashingen. D.I.Y still keeps his old habits and visits his friend's grave and talks to him about life. Then his eyes burst into tears when he realizes that Ty's son will be named Gothing, and then Gothing's son will be called Shingen. It's a complete cycle. So, what do you guys think of this book? Did you like it? I urge you to find it and read it because the dialogues and the way it's written are amazing. It's a fun book about friendship and how friendship carries on. It's about worst parts of humans like prejudice. It's about war and how the realities of war are the same no matter the era. I hope we spread a good message and try to find ways to communicate even with our enemies. So let me know in the comments below what you think, if you think the end might have been different, and find this book and read it. It's worth it. Until then, see you in the next one, and thank you for watching.